Hey David, how's it going
Hey
tonight?
Ryan, pretty good. How are you doing?
Good, good. So, for those of you who don't know us, I'm Ryan Hartwig. I'm considered one of the Facebook whistleblowers, and this is David Johnson, the Hasbro whistleblower, who exposed critical race theory in with a toy maker. And so, we are here tonight to talk to you about Twitter and internet censorship and a lot of things that are going on this week. As you know, this week Elon Musk purchased Twitter for what was it, $43 billion, and
I believe so.
so there's a lot going on. But David, feel free to please introduce yourself, and then we'll go into the content.
Sure. For those who don't know me, I am the Hasbro CRT critical race theory whistleblower. I was an engineer at Hasbro until they decided they wanted the engineers to push critical race theory onto their um, customers through their packaging and products. I oppose this because I believe that people need to be judged on their actions. And so I brought that attention to Project Veritas. And now I'm trying to kind of center myself as I don't want to be an anti-critical race theory activist. I don't like that. I'm a pro-freedom meritocracy advocate. Let's go with that.
There we go. It's awesome. So yeah, so great to have this kind of casual conversation about a variety of things. And so yeah, I went public in June of 2020. I can't believe it's almost been 2 years. And I was working at Facebook as a content moderator. And a lot of what I uncovered is it was this bias against straight white males. And so, for example, Facebook allowed this attack on straight white males. They said it's okay to attack straight white males for not supporting LGBT. So you can call them filth. For example, straight white males are filth for not supporting LGBT.
Jeez.
Facebook said that's okay. And then the same thing with white trash. The phrase white trash previously was hate speech, and then Facebook said it's no longer hate speech. And so I think a lot of what both you and I, both of our discoveries have a lot in common because it deals with race. And so let's talk about the left's response to Elon Musk buying Twitter, and because we know Twitter has been used to censor conservatives greatly. So let's watch a short clip here from The View, and I don't know this individual's name, but she um,
The left's reaction to Elon purchasing Twitter has been very, very telling. I think even if
yeah,
the purchase hadn't gone through, just the insight into how these people are operating and how they're so viscerally reacting to just one person coming in to bring in changes shows a lot. And The View is a really good example of this.
yeah,
Just the
exactly.
culture around this platform.
It doesn't even make sense too. Well, let's watch this 30-second clip, and then we'll analyze this. Yeah, the logic here. So here is The View.
On Twitter, it is predominantly straight white men. So when Elon Musk says, wow, this is about free speech, it seems to me that it's about free speech of straight white men. And so let them have it. Let them just go at it. I enjoy the block button on Twitter. I think it has a real outsized influence in our world because politicians and celebrities are on it.
So that's really just, yeah. Okay, so
It's
her logic is, let's just follow this logic. I can't believe this person's even on TV. So she makes this wild assumption with no data to back it up, where she's saying that majority of the people on Twitter are straight white men. So I don't even know the breakdown of the demographics of Twitter. I highly doubt the
I
majority.
looked into it a little bit.
You did, okay.
Twitter is slightly skewed towards men, just as I think the reverse is Instagram is slightly more favored by women. But I think it is true that most of Twitter is men. I don't know if it's white men. That's a bit of a. I would like to see the numbers on that.
Yeah.
But it does skew male, and that's might just be because of the nature of the platform being
Okay.
mostly text based. But just how she immediately jumps to if it's about freedom of speech, then it's going to be freedom of speech for straight white men, and that nothing Elon has come out and said has been along the lines of race or gender or sex. But the View has this isn't the first time that they've done this.
Yeah.
Whoopi had a
I
previous
have
comment a
that clip
few
pulled up.
weeks
Yeah,
ago.
I have the other clip pulled up. Do you want to watch it for a second?
Yeah, you can show that.
Okay.
Just to give
So
some more context.
Whoopi Goldberg, she's talking about the Holocaust, and it's going to shock you what she says. So let me share this real quick. Okay. All right, what does she say? Okay.
About it.
Oh, here we go.
Let's be truthful about it, because the Holocaust isn't about race.
The Holocaust
The
isn't
Holocaust.
about race.
Well, I'm not going to quote her,
Yeah,
but yes, that's her.
definitely repeat
That's her
that.
opinion, and it's telling because the leftist worldview, the intersectional worldview, is a better way to put it,
Yeah.
is completely built upon identity. And for her to come out and say that the Holocaust is not about race, it's because she's viewing racism specifically through the left-wing intersectional lens. And that is that racism is about white people and people who are not white. It's a completely visual interpretation of race, as opposed to outside of the United States. Racism is generally more different ethnicities discriminating against one another. And obviously in World War II, it was the Germans discriminating against the Jews amongst other populations because they felt they were the inferior race. That was their belief. But Whoopi is both ignorant of history and arrogant in her beliefs, that she can come out and claim that the Holocaust was not about race, and then doubles down on it in the future by saying that it's just white people attacking other white people. And it's so reductive. It's such a narrow way to look at history, culture, events, and conflict that you really can't pull any kind of nuanced information out of that kind of description. But it does fuel their narrative that racism is just about white people oppressing people who don't look white. And it's wrong. It's so discriminatory, but it's very telling that they're just comfortable saying things like that out in the open.
Yeah, and she probably didn't even get in trouble for it. I mean, there's probably a little bit of backlash, but I mean, obviously she still has her job. She hasn't been canceled or anything like that.
I believe she was suspended for a few weeks following that. But the recent comment just kind of shows that they all live in that they all share that same worldview.
Yeah.
That they just perceive things through the narrow race of intersectionality.
Right.
So with Elon, when they come out and say that he's just wanting to support the freedom of speech for straight white men, I think there's kind of two reasons for that. And the first is to kind of poison the well a little bit about what Elon's trying to do.
Yeah.
By just saying if it's for straight white men, then the implication is that there's going to be some level of discrimination against those who are not straight white men. So it automatically paints the entire situation in a negative light, because most people don't like racism. No one likes the idea that someone's being discriminated against because of their inherent characteristics. But on a deeper level, and I'm not even sure that the host of The View would be aware of this, is when they claim something is the reason, when they claim something in that phrasing where they're going after it from the perspective of race and identity, it's a way of enabling power structures to take control of that thing, because they view racism, or what they view as racism, as an active discrimination, and then thus there must be a counteraction against it. And usually that comes in the form of anti-racism or another pro-discriminatory method, but it gives more control to people above to come in and regulate it based on how they want that thing to run. So it's another path towards authoritarianism, you could say.
So they're trying to create a problem. So they're saying, hey, the reason they're trying to create this narrative that, hey, Elon bought Twitter because he's racist and he wants other people to be racist. And so now we just heard this week, actually, the Biden administration under DHS is creating a new, I guess, hierarchy or new organization to combat disinformation. So like disinformation, I forget the name of it, but that's really frightening. And if you look at, so I think you're right. I think they're trying to poison the well against Elon Musk. And the CEO of Twitter right now, I think his name is Parag. Correct me if I'm wrong. He in the leaked 45-minute call that they had with all the employees, the all hands phone call with Twitter leadership, Parag was optimistic about Elon Musk, and Jack Dorsey has spoken about him positively. And these CEOs, they've had conversations with Elon. Obviously, if he were racist, they would know. They would know about that. And the board, obviously, the board of directors wouldn't have accepted the sale. Imagine what's that imagine an actual racist trying to buy Twitter. What's that guy's name? David something. The KK. What's his name? Anyways, so yeah,
David
imagine
Duke.
David Duke, maybe.
Yes.
Imagine him trying to buy Twitter. But looking at that 45-minute phone call, that all hands call, we see a lot of things. It's really telling because in multiple occasions, the CEO talked about how we're going to inform Elon Musk and talk to him and educate him about what we've learned in our process. But they asked about whether or not Trump would come back, and they asked a few other poignant questions. And one thing that really jumped out to me was how many times Parag, the CEO, mentioned safety. Like, oh, we're trying to keep
That was big.
the Twitter safe and keep a healthy conversation, a healthy public environment. And it almost sounded like I was confused. I'm like, is this a social media company, or is this like a hospital CEO talking to his employees about
very, very loaded language. I wrote down a quote from that, the longer leaked conversation, where he says, we make decisions for the health of public conversation every day. And like you said, that the concept of healthy conversations just comes up constantly in that dialogue. And it's another way I see them as justifying their use of censorship and other authoritarian tactics to kind of maintain their narrative, because they view the things that go against what they believe as being unsafe. And then if it's unsafe, we have a duty to keep our platform safe, because they believe they're invested in the health of public conversation. And that's a terrifying thing. A terrifying notion that this small group of Twitter trust and safety is, well, it's a fitting name for them, but that they believe that it's their duty to manufacture and regulate all of the possible conversations that's allowed to have on their supposed platform. And it really strikes more of they're acting as a publisher, but a publisher on such a massive scale.
Yeah, and that's the great misunderstanding about Section 230. And when I was at Facebook, we had the same thing where we would escalate these issues. And leading up to the 2020 election, so I was there from 2018 to 2020, and we would raise up trends, like political trends. So they wanted political trends raised up to Facebook. So why, if Facebook's just worrying about deleting illegal content, then why would they care about political speech? And so Section 230 is there just to, it basically allows these websites to take down clearly illegal content, child trafficking,
as they should.
Yeah, and so that gives them that ability to, even though technically you could argue that some of that is anyway, so that it gives them liability, but Section 230 gives them liability protections. But Section 230 didn't say, oh, hey, we want to keep online safe and have safe public conversations. So Congress is authorizing these companies to keep conversations healthy, whatever the hell that means. So they've kind of twisted Section 230 into, it's a way to censor people, but they view it. But honestly, I think a lot of the employees there really think they're making a difference, that they're protecting the world from evil racists like Trump or Elon Musk now, I guess.
I completely agree. They genuinely see it as they are protecting their customers and their user base from what they view as harm. And you hear these kind of slogans pretty often, that silence is violence, or that the wrong type of language is violence. And on Twitter, I believe they have a misgendering policy, which falls under what they call harm. And it's just another way of them escalating the rhetoric that certain kinds of speech is harmful. And if it's harmful, then they have a duty to protect that. They have a
Yeah,
duty to stop it from reaching other people. But what that comes across to everyone else who's not inside of their ideological framework is you are censoring otherwise healthy conversation and dialogue because you find it uncomfortable.
right.
And that's having such a corrosive effect on our society and other countries. And I think that's actually one of the few things I agree with Sunny of The View. She said that
Hmm.
Twitter is not real life, and that's true. But Twitter has an out of scale sense of prominence because former and current presidents are on it, our politicians are on it, our celebrities use it, and their voices are amplified to millions and billions of people.
Yeah,
But Twitter isn't used by most of the population, and most of Twitter's staff has a very heavily leaning worldview, and it's very heavily to the left, and that's evident in their terms of service.
yeah,
I think Tim Pool brings it up the most often when he says, if you look at Twitter's misgendering policy, how they view it is if you call someone by the gender pronouns that they do not affirm, you're misgendering them.
hmm,
That's the opposite as the conservative or the right views it, which is misgendering someone is calling someone by anything other than the pronouns of their birth sex. Those are
wow.
two incompatible views, but Twitter picks the left side on that. And
Yeah,
they
when
banned
I was at
people for it.
Facebook, we had a similar thing happen where we started deleting female gendered cursing more often. So, but male gendered cursing would stay up. So literally, if I call you a bitch versus a dick, one of those gets deleted and one doesn't because they're prioritizing female gendered cursing.
Well,
And yeah.
they're prioritizing the whatever they perceive to be the more oppressed group. So it's
Mm,
usually men are at the bottom, straight people, women, people of color, arguably Muslims, immigrants, trans people is
this all
usually
comes
the
from this
hierarchy.
obscure theory that's taught in colleges and universities that's now somehow becoming mainstream. So it amazing. I just find it, I'm just awestruck that this small group of people is pushing out this random weird just very obscure ideology of gender and race onto millions of Americans. And I think most Americans really, I honestly don't, I would say 99% of Americans are not racist at all. They love all people equally. They don't understand why this all these movements get pushed forward about, gender pronouns. And let me share this part of my book here. My book is Behind the Mask of Facebook, and I write about racism a lot. There's a couple of chapters about it. So let me just share that with you real quick. So this chapter is chapter 10, Facebook in black and white. And I moderated in Latin America, so I would see all kinds of slurs and racism in Latin America. And one thing I came across was Marcus Garvey. So Marcus Garvey was a guy in the early 1920s, who advocated for segregation. He's a black guy, and he wanted to send Africans back to Africa. So he openly advocated for segregation and was considered a black nationalist. But he was not considered, and this is my book, Behind the Mask of Facebook. You can find it on Amazon. And so, yeah, so Marcus Garvey, he was not on their hate figure list, although he was exactly what a hate figure should be. And so white nationalists were on their hate figure list, but they ignored people like Marcus Garvey. So the other person at the same period of time in the 20s and 30s was Oswald Mosley in Great Britain, who was on the hate figure list, but yet Marcus Garvey was not. Here's this guy saying, hey, we should send all the black people back to Africa. So
Well, the left world ideology, they support black nationalism. Black Lives Matter is a really good example of that. A lot of their iconography comes from the actual African People's Socialist Party of Africa, who want to they see all black people across the world as displaced Africans, and they kind of want to unite them under what is basically a racial ethno state of Africa. I
interesting.
don't support that. I'm an American first and foremost,
Yeah.
but black nationalism and its ideals are very, very popular and prominent among a lot of left-wing personalities.
Yeah.
Ibram X. Kendi is a great example of that. he openly supports the idea that Black people, well, as he puts it, people of color should be separated from whites. And when it's put into practice at like universities, you see it as like day of racial awareness or a day without white people. I don't remember which college did that,
Hmm.
but you see their kind of their beliefs being followed very ardently and very eagerly by a lot of left-wing centers of influence, let's say.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how much of a as a culture we're brainwashed to think that way because I look recently I've seen advertisements or signage at Target. So there's sections that support just Black businesses, and now if you take that word, if you replace that with any other race, like can you imagine any kind of a slogan or advertising saying, hey, support your local white business or support your local Asian business? Like it's laughable. Like when you think about it, you're like, if you say the phrase support your local white business, that just and just because we've watched so much media and we're in our it's this society, we think of that as racism. But if you say support your local Black business, it's not racist. So we've really been conditioned to think of races in different terms. And like you were saying at the beginning, it's only racism if it's against certain people, but there's no racism against white people can't exist. That's the conditioning that we've been led towards.
They've been the critical race theorists in particular have been very successful at convincing people that racism is no longer treating someone different because of their skin color or just their ethnicity. Our country is unfortunately at the point where a lot of people genuinely believe that racism is prejudice plus power, which is the Marxist definition that Ibram X. Kendi works with and other people like Kimberly Crenshaw. And it goes back to the idea that only the group in power, which they view as white people as a group, can be racist because they hold that institutional power to keep all the other groups down. Never mind the fact that many industries are led by not white people, many of the sports, entertainment industries dominated by people who are Black or Asian or women. And we had a Black president for 8 years that a lot of people love to this day.
Yeah.
But none of that matters because they just view majority group in power, so they're the oppressor to the other minority groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's all very fascinating. And so just to recap what we've talked about today, guys, we talked about the Twitter all hands meeting, Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, purchase of Twitter. So the company is going private now, and there was that leaked 45-minute audio of Twitter employees asking questions about Elon Musk and whether or not Trump will come back on the platform, and them wanting to keep healthy, safe conversations as part of Twitter, which by safe they mean safe, free from all kind, right-leaning opinions or thoughts.
Safe from criticism. That's what they mean by that. They want their ideas to be safe from any type of critique, criticism, or scrutiny. And I think that's very telling because a lot of their ideas only exist because of the censorship. Because if you look at, say, a tenet of left-wing ideology is like trans women or women, for example. A bit of a tangent, but it's an easy example to use. If you put any kind of scrutiny under that idea, it falls apart like a house of cards. But on Twitter, you can just ban people en masse from even sending that to people in DMs if you wanted to. So there's never even the chance for a counter argument to be presented. And it's through that kind of censorship and algorithmic manipulation and promotion that their ideas are able to continuously spread. And that's probably why so many of them are having such a terrified response. You have Twitter employees breaking down and crying because Elon bought the company. He hasn't even done anything yet because the deal isn't purchased or is not finalized.
Yeah.
And even in the meeting, some of them were asking questions like, is there going to be an updated understanding as to what freedom of speech is? And the CEO didn't really comment on that. But I think the fact that that question is being asked shows the culture of Twitter. They know full well that what they are doing is suppressing and against the notion of free speech.
Yeah.
But it gives them an advantage, so they're okay with it. Now that there's the possibility that that tool is going to be taken away from them, we see Obama, we see the White House, we see so many prominent figures come out and say, actually, we need to start regulating private companies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's so much I mean, there's so much in that. And I guess the biggest takeaway is that, the answer to bad speech is more speech. So there's always going to be bad speech and horrible hate speech out there. And no, I don't think we should, I don't think it's right for people to be, attacking Jews, for example, on Twitter. But the answer to the bad speech is always more speech. So will there be fringe people doing attacks like that? Yeah, and like the personal review said as well, which I agree with, you can use the block button, like block someone. If you don't want to listen to them, block them. Doesn't mean they shouldn't have a right to speak out.
And they
But
should.
yeah,
And I support the ladies of the View coming out and having their opinion, because that's what free speech is.
yeah,
And
they're
I hope
entitled to their
all of,
opinion. Just
yep,
like Whoopi Goldberg can have her opinion and think that the Holocaust had nothing to do with racism.
yeah, and I want her to say that, and I also want other people to come in and challenge her, because that's how we can determine who's more correct and who has more logic to their argument. We need to have both sides being able to come together and actually have that kind of discussion. And I'm hoping that's what Elon will bring to Twitter. I'm not certain, because Elon, I think, has a very, very uphill battle. Twitter is not designed currently to support freedom of speech, and I don't know how well Elon understands that.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Um,
it's gonna be tough, because what do you do? Do you fire all the employees and hire new engineers? Then that would be very hard to do. Um, you do have to transform the culture, but it makes it even harder, because most of the employees, well, they probably live remotely now, but they live, Twitter headquarters is in San Francisco, so they're surrounded by this culture of leftism and these ideologies. And so I don't know, maybe he'll move their headquarters to the Midwest or something.
if he moved it to the Midwest or to Texas, that'd be a huge shift. But
Yeah,
also, I don't want to just end on such a pessimistic note. I think it's also possible that if Elon just opens the platform back up, he allows people like Trump, Carl Benjamin, Project Veritas, obviously, to just
yeah,
exist on the platform, even if how to- even if there aren't any other significant changes other than that, just allowing both voices to exist, I think
yeah.
will start to push our culture, maybe not even right wing, but just back towards logic and reasoning for understanding, as opposed to emotion and virtue sigma.
Yeah, I think that even if at a bare minimum, even if they tweak the algorithms and remove some of that horrible part of the algorithm that really censors people on the right. But yeah, even if you bring back a few voices, and that's progress. So yeah, we'll see how things pan out in the next 6 months, if Elon can convince those employees. And yeah, I'm slightly optimistic about that all. I really think blockchain social media is the way to go, using the technology of cryptocurrency for social media. And I think Gab is a great platform, but
Yeah, it's
we'll end
fantastic.
it at that. And so thanks for joining me tonight, David. Hopefully we'll have more of these vlogs, these podcasts, so we can talk about various issues. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion, and have a great night.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. I thought it was a good conversation. People can follow me on Gab at noble_stripes and Getter. Probably not Twitter, but we'll see how that develops.
Sounds good. Yeah, be sure to follow David on Gab there, and keep in touch.